Generation Church, we are so excited that you are here with us.
Absolutely.
I would say, if I had to guess, I don't know where you are, but I would say that you've had some sort of snow day this week.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh.
It's been crazy.
What is up with that?
You live in Bowling Green.
Yes.
I live here in Portland, and my roads are terrible.
Yeah. Welcome to Generation Church. We are so We have small group. We've been in small groups together, and it's always a lot of fun. There's always a lot of good food involved, and I'm here for that.
Most important part, good food.
Yes.
Check.
I need to know ahead of time what the week's meals are so that I know which week I'm really looking forward to.
Stop.
I'm halfway kidding. But we have been in small groups together that have been in.
Yeah.
Kelsey is actually leading a small group this semester for blended families. It's really cool.
If you're a blended family, single parent, blended family, step parent, hey, we'd love to have you. Join us. You can go. You can still sign up. There's still, for my small group, for anybody's small group, you can still sign up right now. You can go on our website, explore our website.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of really good tools on there.
Agree.
That talk about things like small groups, like how you can get involved, our next steps, which are like crazy important. We always talk about here how there's a you that you haven't met yet. Like, you'll hear people say that over and over and over again, and we really truly believe that there's always something that you should be working towards. You should be taking a next step towards and try to find that you that you haven't met yet.
Yep. And baptisms are on there. I know, like, in a couple weeks we have anniversary weekend, which is one party weekend. Like, we get so hype around here for anniversary weekend because it's just a reminder that why the church was built, what the dreams were and the visions were, and to keep us like on track with that. Like, we want to know and get excited again. So anniversary weekend coming up, it's gonna be I'm pumped about it. It's gonna be awesome. But also there's baptisms that weekend, so sign up for baptisms if that is you, because not only are we celebrating, like, we're a party church. Like, people say that all the time. It's whatever. I'll own it. If you just blame it on me, that's fine too. But we celebrate everything around here. When you take a next step, when you have a first-time guest, when you bring friends, anything like that. But baptisms are especially crazy cool.
Huge party.
Like, it is so fun to hear people like that you don't even know. Like, you may not even know who is going from death to life in the actual baptismal, but like. You are celebrating. You're screaming in the back of the room, like getting high up and jumping. It's just a lot of fun. So we want to celebrate that. If that is you, there's also on that website. And I just like to throw out there, our website is so user friendly.
Yeah.
Like, anyone can get on it and do it. Like, your grandma can get on our website and find what she needs to find.
Yes, Grandma, even you.
Sorry,
talking to you.
that might have been offensive, but my grandmas don't get on the internet, so let's just
My
go
grandma
with
is
that.
really cool, and she watches online sometimes. So if you're watching, Grandma, hey,
We
I
love you, Grandma, so very much, and
Yeah.
don't be offended at me. But we had a lot of, that's a lot of fun. We have a lot of things on that website, like old archives of messages that were in weeks past, or even like months past, or guest speakers, or anything. I mean, the website is full of stuff. So generationchurch.me. You will not want to miss it. Get on that website right now.
And speaking of things that are like full archives where you can go on and like look at just all kinds of things that'll help you grow, we as a church just recently invested in something called Right Now Media. And I do devotions. I listen to those on the way to work in the mornings. We started devotions with not both of our kids. We've got a baby, an 11-month-old, and we've got a 10-year-old. 10-year-old loves it. Like, she loves getting on there and being able to listen and engage. There is so much good content on there, you guys. It's we've been calling it the Netflix of
Bible study.
Yeah,
you can peruse through it, scroll, find the one you want. My kids do the same thing. Like, it's almost like we've tricked them. At nighttime, we always do devotions together too, but they usually do them separate. Like, each one does it because they're 10, 7, and 6. Well, and the little one, but he doesn't really know. But the other ones, like, they do them by themselves to learn at their pace. But, like, now they're, like, watching it, listening to it, and, like, kind of feeding off each other. So it's really cool. And it's free.
Free.
Like,
Generation
all
Churches
letters.
footing the bill for that.
Free.
Totally take advantage of that.
I mean,
like
it's
it is.
my best thing in life is when they say things are free. So
free food at small group, free right now media.
We're all about
we
you.
are seeing a trend here.
We are all about you.
We're all about
helping you out.
Bethany. All about you.
My dad used to say that when I was younger. He's like, "It's your world, Bethany. We just live in it." And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds good."
Cool, sounds good to me.
Right.
Let's continue.
Anyways, so as we get started today with this experience, number one, we're pumped that you're here. Number two, we hope that you will have a notebook out and a pen and ready to take some dynamic notes that could change the outlook of your family, could change the outlook of your relationships, could change the outlook of your week. But these notes you can refer to.
Yeah, for sure.
I keep notebooks and I like to like fill them all the way up, obviously, before I put them on the shelf. And I found one the other day and was kind of like looking back through it and some of the notes, and I'm like, oh, I remember that message. Like, you kind of remember where you were, like even maybe where you were sitting, things that happened that day. Like, it brings back memories. So I encourage you to take notes, to worship together, stand to your feet when we worship. Like, just like we were there. I'm a firm believer that, like, God inhabits wherever we are.
Yes.
So whether it's in your car you're listening to on your lunch break, whether it's at home on your couch, whether it could be at your friend's house, wherever it's at, I believe that God can inhabit you right there.
Right.
So you're at church today, no matter where your physical body is. So engage in church just like you would if you were here on campus. But we're starting a new series. And it's going to be awesome. And we've been laughing about it because she's a goof and was like, how do you pronounce this?
Is it Taruth?
Oh my gosh.
Taruth?
So it's Truth. It is a series about the book of Ruth. So healthy relationships, things you can add to your relationship, take out. There's going to be a lot of toe stepping in this one where, like, you kind of got them out there and they're stepping on your toes a little bit. You kind of bring them back in, you know what I mean? Like, go home and kind of say, ouch. Like, I'm sure there's going to be some of those because it doesn't just relate to relationships as far as, like, married or single, but it's also, like,
all relationships.
Family, friends, like, any kind of relationship you can have. We both are in the selling business, so, like, even this could be something that is passed on to our relationship with our clients. Things that we can learn from it, how to change ourselves and our nature and our mindset to even go into our business world. So that's really cool. This week is about commitment.
All about commitment today. So we're going to dive really deep, and I know some people hear that word commitment and they're all of a sudden like, I'm gonna log off. My power went out. No. So really, it's a great message that we're hearing today, all about commitment. And like Bethany said, you're gonna get your toe stepped on a little bit, but sometimes I feel like God puts things in front of you and has people say things to you that really makes you kind of look introspectively and say, you know what, that is something that I can work on. That is something that I can grow on. That's something I can pray about. And I just challenge you today to listen to the message that we've got going on and hear that and say, you know what, you're right. That's something that I can pray about and I can work on and work towards to meet that me I haven't met yet.
So, and speaking of commitment, real quick, just a quick hint. Don't forget to be committed to your giving and your generosity to Generation Church. We are here. All of this is here. Everything that you are seeing right now is because of your generosity.
100%.
Stay committed. It's on the website. It's on the app. You can give in person. But church, today, let's join this experience. Let's join this worship, and let's really see what Jesus has in store for us today.
Against the power of my God, you shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of my God. 'Cause He's an almighty force, and God, you go before us today. Nothing can stand against the power of my God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Yeah. Nothing can stand up. Come on, lift up your voice to Him. He's an almighty force, and God, you go before us. Yeah. Nothing can stand against the power of my God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of my God. So when I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high, saying, oh God, my battle belongs to you. And every fear I lay at your feet, I sing through the night. Oh God, my battle belongs to you. Yeah. Oh God, my battle belongs to you. Yeah. Come on, are you thankful that you get to lay your battle at His feet today? Jesus, we're so thankful that you've won every victory for us. Over depression, over addiction, over stress, over anxiety. You've won every single victory. Not just for us, but for our kids, for our grandkids, for generation after generation. You're pulling us out of darkness and causing us to step into destiny today. Come on, if you receive that, lift up your hands to Him. Let's sing. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make His face shine upon and be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. You believe that today? Even online, let's sing it out. Sing. The Lord bless you, yeah, and keep you, and make His face shine upon you. He'll be gracious to you. Lord, turn His face toward you and give you peace. Oh, Spirit's moving. Don't let this time pass you by. All over my life. promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. Help me remember when I'm weak. Fear may come, but fear will leave. You lead my heart to victory. You are my strength, and you always will be. I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. Yes, I see the cross, the empty grave, the evidence is endless. All my fears roll away because of you, oh Jesus. I see the cross, the empty grave, the evidence is endless. All my sin roll away because of you, oh Jesus. I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life. Come on. All over my, you believe it? Yes, oh Lord. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my. Come on, if you believe, you better sing it out. Yes, I see the evidence of your goodness. You're all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. Yes. So why should I fear? Oh, the evidence is here. Yes, Lord. Why should I feel, oh Lord, the evidence is here. Come on.
Man, I love this song. I love the message of the song. Like, this is just, you know, like you got that jam, what the kids call it nowadays, you got that bop. You're just like, hey, it moves you. Now, I remember the very first time I heard this song. I was sitting over here in the front row. Pastor Andy started. And like, I don't know about you guys, but Generation Worship is my favorite band. And voice like an angel, that Andy. But man, they started singing it, and like, I just want to be honest. Like, sometimes it's hard for me. Like, I'm an aggressive person. Sometimes I get focused on like what's coming instead of always looking backwards. Like, sometimes I'm always worried about what's the next part of my life, what's the next story, what's the next challenge. Sometimes I can miss out on like where God's brought me from, or like all of those things. And so like I hear this song, and it reminds me, like for no other reason, like it reminds me of like the evidence of God's faithfulness in my life. My life. Like, I can remember when I was a teenager, and like, you wouldn't believe it now, but like, I said crazy stuff. And like, man, like, I cussed like a sailor. And I remember the day Jesus changed me, he changed me. And people was like, something's different. Like, I remember the evidence of that day. I remember like later when I wanted to go to college at Cumberland University, and like, we were poor. And my wife wanted to go to college at Cumberland University, but her family was poor. And we ended up, by God's providence, meeting in a Baptist student union. And like God's evidence navigating both of us to the same place at the same time. I remember getting married to that lady, and like several years into our marriage, like going to a physician, and that doctor saying there is no way you will ever have kids. And then this morning I dropped 2 of them off. Guess I was going to the wrong physician. I remember standing on the stage much like this on the day that I had to close the church. And like birthing a church is one thing, but like doing a funeral of a church is totally different thing. But I remember the day standing in God's faithfulness in that season so I could stand in God's faithfulness in this season. Like I've seen the evidence of God's goodness in my life. And like the powerful thing as one of your pastors is like I have the joy of seeing over and over again God move in the Thompson family, but I also get the honor of seeing God move in some of y'all's stories. I remember the day Pastor Allen walked into this place and said, I've got a son in jail and they're never going to let him out. And I remember the day he walked in upstairs and said, my son is out. I remember the day in the annex when a friend of mine named Kevin is supposed to have a tumor and they're going to go in and do exploratory surgery. And I remember us getting together around some crappy furniture and praying and getting that phone call, and they said, you're not going to believe it. It's gone. I said, I believe it. I believe it. I remember the day I met a guy out in the lobby who walked in, and I didn't know, but a few days before he tried to kill himself at a parking lot of a grocery store. And yesterday he was sitting over here. He was saved, baptized, serving. Last night somebody walked into this place and said, hey, my marriage is done. And they walked out different. Like I've seen over and over and over again the evidence of God's goodness. And so here's what I'm able to believe. Here's what I know we're able to believe. It's because if God has been faithful then, I believe God is going to continue to be faithful now. I believe if God has been able to do it in my life, that I serve the same God who's able to do it in your life. And I believe like He's done it before, and I believe He can do it over and over and over again. I believe God is not done in my life. I believe God is not done in your life. I believe there's a person we haven't seen yet. We move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I see you know you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I see you move, you move the mountains, and I believe I'll see you do it again. You made a way where there was no way, and I believe I'll see you do it again. I'll see you do it again. Oh, yes, Lord. These things. Because I know that I walked into a place and you walked into a place that believes God is a promise maker and a promise keeper. So like we're able to stand in the presence of a Savior today who has been faithful in the middle of our faithlessness. And so that we are able to stand on the promises that God has for us, the promises that say that if we continue to lift Him up, He's going to continue to draw people into Himself. The promise that says where 2 or 3 are gathered, Jesus is here with us. The promise that says, even when I don't see it, like God is working for the good of those who choose to believe in Him. That God is still doing His promises. He is still a good God. And we can stand in that faithfulness. We can stand in Him. The promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. God, that when it don't don't feel like you're doing things, God, you are writing a beautiful story that, God, sometimes we can't even see it. God, you are faithful. God, I pray we can be reminded today of the things you have done for us in the past, the simple things and the significant things, God, that you have been doing something for our good and for your glory. So God, I pray as we worship you in spirit and truth, Father, as we worship you above all things, God, we give you that honor. We give you the acknowledgement, God, that you are good, God, and you are doing stuff for us, Jesus. So we praise you in this place. God, we celebrate you in this place. Father, we're thankful for you. And your church says, amen. Hey, good morning. If we would, let's welcome online all those people who are joining us today. Hey, we also got some folks out in the overflow. For those of you hanging out, we are so honored you're here. You've won. Jay, grab a seat. We're going to take just a second. If there's somebody you haven't seen in a while, you can say, hey, what's up? All those things. I'm seeing some folks. See you guys. Hey, man, missed you. Hey, my name's Dustin. I know we haven't got a chance to meet properly. Some of y'all are new. So, hey, welcome. My job, I get the honor of being the executive pastor of this place. And so a lot of people have no idea what that means. I love to keep it that way. Like if nobody knows what your expectations are, like you're guaranteed to succeed. So my job, I have the joy of being able to execute Pastor Brandon's vision. So when Pastor Brandon, like when God gives him like a direction, a strategy, like I get to figure it all out. And so like the secret is like I'm really a middleman because I get to work with like the best directors like Pastor Preston and Miss Jessica. I get to work with like the best staff, the best volunteers. Like, man, I love what we get to do together. Like it's such a powerful thing. Now, one of the things that I get to be a part of is like solving problems. So let me tell you like the secret behind that, okay? Sometimes you just try stuff. Like, you know, like, do I know what's always going to work? Like, no, we're just going to try something. Throw that into it's sort of like cooking on the fly. Like, I don't know what we're having for dinner. We'll just see what happens. So one of the problems that we currently have, which is like a great problem. You ever have problems and you're like, yeah, like I would love to have the problem of too much money. I would love to have the problem of like, I got all this free time. Like we have the problem of like, there are kids all over the place. So I don't know if y'all have had like a good quarantine. I don't know, like man, there's kids all over the place. And it's a great thing. But like, there's also like some drama that comes with that. Like we've had some opportunities, we've had some worship experiences where we've had to turn kids away. Now, one of the solutions that I'm really excited about, like I don't know if y'all been able to see it with all the snow, but like they're actually right about to dig the footers for like our phase 2 building expansion. Yeah. Y'all celebrate. I'm about to get even balder. Like that's what that means, okay? Like it's just meeting in the middle. Like, But like that's a solution for tomorrow. And sometimes we have to live in the tension of today. And so I want to share with you like how we're going to solve that tension today. So first off, in a few weeks, we're getting to celebrate 9 years as a church. 9 years of God's faithfulness. Some cool stuff's happening. I'm sure like I could tell you, but you know, Pastor Brandon would fire me. Like I like job security. So, but no, you need to plan on bringing your friends to that experience. It's going to be a great time for us to look forward and look back. Like I'm really looking forward to it. But let me tell you what we're going to do on that weekend. That weekend, we are kicking off 5 worship experiences so we can continue to reach our community. It's an awesome opportunity. So I'm just thankful for that. How are we going to do it? I ain't got no clue. Like that's what... But here's what it means. It means we're going to have worship experiences a Saturday at 5 o'clock and 6:30. And we're going to have our Sunday experiences at 8:30, at 10, and 11. And then for those of you who are watching online, 10 o'clock will be our live worship experience. And so how we're going to do that, like it's really going to be like a group effort. Like we're going to have some volunteers. We're going to have people who say like, hey, I currently serve 1, maybe I will serve 2. It's going to take a group of us to be able to continue to reach our city. But here's what I know about our church. Every part of the journey, the evidence of what God has done in the past is like when there's been an opportunity, we step up to serve other people. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm excited for those things to come, but I'm also excited for the privilege to stand in Pastor Brandon's place and share with you guys a new series. So today we're kicking off a series called The Truth About Dating and Marriage. Now, I am looking forward to this series. Like I love relationships. I love the topic of it. I love when I get to be involved with it. Like every now and then they'll let me be a part of like a marriage small group. Every now and then, like I get to be a part of like the marriage re-engage ministry. You may not know we've got like a bunch of couples coming up here getting invested into in their marriage. It's pretty powerful. Now, here's what I believe. I think they want Melissa and they'll tolerate me to get her. Like, I think that's what's happening. I have the privilege of being the unsolicited staff marriage counselor. I say unsolicited because they don't ask for it, but you know, when you have a gift, you have to share it, right? Like it's my privilege. Now, I also probably need to pause and tell you about that kids ministry. Like, if you are uncomfortable with anything that's about to happen, you might want to take your kids to that kids ministry. So it's sort of like the family pet's been let out, and like you might get loved on, you might get bit, you may get peed on. I don't fully know what's about to happen, okay? I just want you to know that like you have been warned at least twice by Pastor Preston and now me, okay? And so here's why I'm telling you that, okay? And this is why I like marriages I love, but it's also like a love-hate thing. I have 100% success rate with like marriages that I've got to perform. But it's partially because I tell people the truth, and it's partially like I freak them out and they don't ask me to do their weddings, okay? But here's why all this stuff I love, okay? Because I like to be a truth speaker. Like I have a firm belief that like it's a core conviction of mine. It's like something that we desperately want is authenticity, and we're scared to death of it when we see it. And so like it takes a little while for us to like get basically to start to get comfortable with the truth. And that's the problem, because the truth makes people uncomfortable. Like we live in a day and age, like we have been conditioned in a day and age to where like if there is authenticity, it's awkward. We're just like, I don't know what to do with it. Like I don't know what to do with my hands. I don't know what to do with this person. Like I'm just going to walk away. Like the truth makes people uncomfortable. And like, man, is there anywhere else where that's true other than relationships? And like, here's the problem when it comes to specifically the truth in relationships. Is like we have had like years of these preconceived ideas of what we're getting ourselves into. And part of it is birthed out of like our dreams and our expectations. And part of it is birthed out of like our culture and our influences. So like, let me just give you, a few examples, okay? So like, we have this idea of what our wedding is going to be like. Some of you who've been married, some of you who haven't been married, and there's ladies from the time they're little girls have like this dream wedding. They've got the dress picked out before they've got the man. They've got the man picked out before they got the man, and then they settled with all you guys. Like, I can't have Matthew McConaughey, I'll settle for Gaines. There's these things that like as kids, like we've set ourselves up to believe. And then this day gets there, and what do you find out? Like, it's not perfect. That weird family member that you didn't send the $75 invitation to still showed up. Like you had everything lined out and like, something was wrong. There wasn't enough food. Somebody you didn't like was there. Somebody had the same color white on. Oh, no, they didn't. Like all these weird things. But like the truth is, like we should spend way more time worrying about our marriage than we are worried about a wedding. Like we'll spend thousands of dollars for a day you won't even remember. But we'll spend nothing on our marriage. We'll get into a marriage in debt. We'll get into a marriage setting ourselves up for failure. And then years later, like, I don't know why it didn't work. Maybe you didn't listen. Like that's one example. We'll get into relationships with this idea of we've got a soulmate. That out of the 8 billion people in the world, there is only one who's right for you. And some of you are like, I'm still holding out. If you hold out long enough, you're going to be buying stuff on the return rack. Okay? Like, let that sink in for a second, okay? Well, I'm just being selective. You need to lower your standards. You're 35, okay? Like, the problem with soulmates, the problem is, like, we get this idea that, like, there's this perfect person for us, but the truth is there is no perfect person. If you are lucky and you work hard enough, you will build a perfect relationship. We have this idea of sex. You were warned, okay? Just throwing that out. Earmuffs. There's this idea of sex, and like, let's be honest, like we get into it with the idea. Hollywood set us up for failure, men. Okay, they tell them it's going to be romantic and passionate in 45 minutes, and you're like, man, my cardio is 10 minutes, and then I'm like dying. You're like 10 minutes, high five. But guys, we set ourselves up for failure because almost every man in this room was introduced to porn at an early age. And so now we live with this affliction of what we have, this false expectation. We don't realize we've set our relationship up for failure because now, like, we're expecting it to be all crazy and like it is on the TV shows. I'm just going to tell you, it's not all crazy like it is on the TV shows. That's what you're holding out for, like it's not going to happen. But then the other problem, like the deeper problem, is men, we don't realize what we've done to our ladies is we've created this false standard that they're never going to be good enough because they have to live to that comparison. And like, here's the truth about sex. If you want to have more sex, you need to learn to be more intimate. What does intimacy mean? Intimacy means being fully known. Genesis chapter 2, it says they were naked and they weren't ashamed. It's like some of you don't have a good sex life because you've never been intimate with your spouse. Like, that's just a free sermon for later. And then there's this idea of like in marriages, we're going to have happily ever after. Like, I like Disney shows. I don't know if y'all like Disney shows. My wife likes Disney princesses. Belle's her favorite. My daughter likes Disney princesses. You ever wonder why there's never a Disney princess show for like after they get together? You ever wonder like, why don't they show that? Why doesn't Disney tell me, where am I supposed to put my arm when I'm sleeping with somebody new? Like, is it over here? Is it here? Like it's, I'd have a chiropractor tell me like, hey, your arm's not meant to be like this when you're sleeping for 8 hours a night. I'm like, oh, well, that'd been useful. Like the truth is there isn't a happily ever after. Marriages are hard work. Relationships are hard work, but it's worth it. These are like some of the truths that if we can lean into, like we set ourselves up for success. But the problem is we've been influenced by the wrong things. We've been conditioned to believe these lies. And over the next few weeks, we're going to dive into the book of Ruth, and we're going to learn some truth that we can apply into every relationship of our life, but specifically dating and marriage relationships. And we can see if we can learn to lean into the truth that's going to set us up for success. And so if you have a Bible, I want to encourage you to turn with me to Ruth chapter 1. It's an Old Testament book. It's it's really early in the Bible, okay? And so we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about Ruth chapter 1. And like this topic is going to be called First Things First. We're going to start with like the most important thing you can grasp about a relationship. And because of that, I'm going to even tell you like what I want you to leave with today. Like if you don't get anything else out of this conversation, like here's like the main point. That the starting point of all healthy relationships is commitment. The starting point of all healthy relationships is commitment. Now, I want you to think about that for a second, okay? Like, think about a relationship that you have. Maybe it's a friendship. Like, you remember as a kid, like, there's that moment where you're like, hey, will you be my friend? Like, will you actually be my friend? Now, maybe as adults, we don't have that awkwardness, but there is a moment where we acknowledge in our brain, like, hey, I am committing to this person. This person is my boy. Like, we're good. Think maybe it's a job. Maybe you work for somebody. There was that moment where you said, yes, please, I would like to work for money. Maybe you're blessed in this place to be an owner or a manager and you've hired people. There's a moment where you're committing not just to take them for labor, but you are committing to like provide for them. Like there is a commitment with that. Maybe you're a person that you are in a dating relationship and there's that awkward moment. Like I don't know how, I know as a teenager, like sort of how it worked. I don't know how it works for adults. Honestly, I didn't do it right. I just started introducing Melissa as my girlfriend and like just assume the clothes sometimes the guys at work, She didn't say no. Hey. But there's that awkward moment where at some point, like you're choosing to be committed. And that's what we're going to dive into. This series, we're going to take a look at something that starts with a commitment, but it's really a love story between a lady and her family, a lady and a man, and ultimately a God and his people, although God is hardly ever mentioned in the story. But we're going to see like God is working in love stories. God is working in this love story, a deeper love story about not just these people, but also about his love for you and for me. Yeah. So let's go. Ruth chapter 1. It says, in the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife was Naomi. The 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephraimites from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. And when they reached Moab, they settled there. Then Elimelech died, and Naomi was left with her 2 sons. The 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpah, the other a woman named Ruth. But about 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died. This left Naomi alone without her 2 sons or her husband. Like, that is super depressing, right? This sounds like the beginning of a Hallmark movie where you're just like, all right, it's going to be horrible. Get the tissue boxes. Not that I watch Hallmark movies at all, you know. If it's a Hallmark movie, Ruth and Naomi would be the same person, and you'd be like, you know. They're like, this is super sad. So let's process what's going on, okay? So the setting of the place starts out in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is in the tribe of Judah. It's in the province of Judah, and it's an agricultural-based society. And so a famine happens. So now there's no food. Where there's no food, there's no resources. There's no provision. And so Elimelech, like a good man, is like, hey, how do I provide for my family? How do I actually take care of them? And so like the bright idea is like, I'm going to move somewhere else. I'm going to go find provision somewhere else. And so in the search for provision, they end up in Moab, which is a different region with a different belief system. And then all of a sudden, this dude dies. Now, it's important. The Bible says 10 years later. So, like, there's time in this. Like, there's commitment, there's relationship, there's a family unit that's developed. But then these 2 guys die. Man, that sounds like a pretty depressing story. It sounds like a pretty depressing place. Now, before we move forward, we have to process that something that was an underlier in an Old Testament belief system, and specifically even still in like some Eastern, like we live in Western civilization, some Eastern civilizations, this still kind of process happens. It's a patriarchal society. And so here's what this means. Like, men were like the supreme. Like, it's super uncomfortable. Like, as a husband of a strong-willed woman, as the father of a daughter, like the idea that women were less than is just sickening. But that's sort of what's going on here, okay? So, like, specifically, ownership and, like, lineage pass through men. And so it's a specific reason when you read through, like, a Bible and you'll see so-and-so is the son of so-and-so. Like, they're sharing, like, the male lineage. And where it's important is, like, at the time, women were like property. And so, like, in this situation, like, women were second-class citizens. And not only are they second-class citizens, they've just become widows. Like, widows in this point are like the lowest of the low. There's a reason, like in James, the apostle says, pure and undefiled religion is those who take care of widows and orphans. Like, it's the least of these. That's what's going on here. I mean, so like to set the setting up, like think about like something depressing and then think about it even worse. Like there's no hope and there's no future. And some of you are like, I don't have to really think about that because I'll walk in here feeling this. You're like, oh, they're talking about relationships for 5 weeks. Well, I'm going to hide in the back and try to sleep. Or I'm like, well, it's a convenient time to take a vacation. I'm not coming back for 5 weeks. Like some of you, like it's depressing to be reminded that you're in here alone. Some of you are like, hey, it's depressing to be reminded of the failed commitments or the relationships I've had. Maybe you are a widow in this place and you're reminded of the person who used to be beside you. Like sometimes life is depressing. And in this moment, in this story, life's depressing. But here's what I want you to hear, okay? That sometimes you've got to walk through a valley before you get to experience a mountaintop moment. Another way of looking at it is like sometimes we think the story's over when really we're at the good part. We're at the part where like God's doing something, but instead of like hanging in and seeing what God's doing in our life, we're like, okay, it's too much. It's over. The way we like to word it around here is there's a version of you haven't met yet. Like there's a way that we can be better. Our story is not over. And like this is exciting because in the middle of all this hopelessness, in the middle of all this depression and brokenness, and the word says aloneness, there's a Naomi and a Ruth we haven't met yet. Let's see if we can meet them. Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So Naomi and her daughters-in-law got ready to leave Moab to return to her homeland. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she set out from the place where she had been living, and they took the road that would lead them back to Judah. But on the way, Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage. Then she kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. Okay, so it still sounds like emotional, like a Hallmark movie. Like now, not only is it sad, like all the ladies are crying. Like, okay, this is just getting weird. So like what's going on? Here is a 10-year committed relationship. For 10 years, these ladies have held a household together. For 10 years, they've grown close together. And now there's an opportunity, like Naomi has heard it, back in my homeland, back in the good places, like there is favor again, like the famine is over. So she actually packs up and starts heading back. Now, think about this, like the awkwardness of this moment. It's the middle of a road trip. Like, they turn around and be like, hey, you can get out if you want to. Now, I just processed that. Like, why didn't you give that option before they ever left? You know, like that would be like the ideal thing. Like, hey, I'm about to go somewhere. You don't have to go with me. But no, like they're committed. But in the middle of the journey, she's like, hey, you should go back to your mother's home. You should go back and find another husband. Why does it say they should go back? It says for security. And see, like part of the problem, part of the lies that we fall into with dating and marriage and with relationships in general is we get into them with the wrong purpose in the first place. We get into them with this idea that it's going to make me secure. So check this out. Moving to Moab didn't make Elimelech secure. Like, bro died. These ladies got married, and like their husbands didn't make them secure. They died. Like all of these things that they did for what seemed like security in their culture didn't work. And we so many times we find ourselves in that same place. Like we'll take a job we should never take. We'll submit to doing something we should never submit to because we think it's going to make us secure. Or we'll get involved into a relationship with somebody we have no business ever getting involved. You know they're not marriage material, but you're like, well, at least I'll be secure. Like guys, let's talk about you for a second. Like statistically and like even like at our core, guys find our security, our identity in like our job and in our money. And like the amount of money in your bank account, if we didn't learn anything in 2020, like the amount of money didn't make you secure. That's right. Now ladies, let's talk about you for a second. Because ladies will settle in a bad relationship because they think they need a man to be secure. And let me tell you something, like ladies, if I can just speak a word into your heart, you need nobody to make you feel like you're more than enough. Like no person is going to make you feel that way. There's a reason why the Bible shows us over and over and over again that Jesus is the only thing that offers us true security. That Jesus is the only person who's going to take us and give us this satisfaction that lets us know like we're more than enough. Jesus, not a man, not a job, not a friendship, it's Jesus. And so in the middle of all this, we see this is what's going on, but there's something else that's happening. So not only is Naomi like giving us this moment of seeing like this lie of security, but there's also this moment where Naomi is giving the girls an opt-out option. There's an opportunity to get out. See, like the truth is you will always have an opportunity to get out of your commitments. Like you always have an opt-out option. Like you don't have to do anything, but so many times with this idea of false security, with this idea of like I'm never going to be enough, like you settle. And in settling, we end up in this weird place where like our commitments are challenged. And this is why this is so important, okay? This is why these opt-out moments are really important. Because true commitment is shown when you have the opportunity to get out, but you choose to stay. That's right. There is this moment when you get to show your commitment by choosing to stay committed. Now let's just process this for a second, okay? Like a lot of us say we're committed, but we don't have an opt-out. A lot of us are like, hey, you know, I would really, this is my dream job. We tell ourselves like this is the best job for us. And it's really, the truth is it's the only job for you. Like there is no opt-out because some of us suck as employees and nobody else will hire us. Some of us like, you know, we're like, hey, baby, you're like my one and only. It's because she's your one and only option. So like, you got married and happy and fat and nobody else will take you. Like it's harsh, but it's true. Like we put ourselves in this place to where we say we're committed, but there's no options. And then all of a sudden when there are options, this is when your commitment's tested. Your commitment is shown when you have the chance to get out, but you choose to stay. I remember when I was dating my wife. We dated for a few years. I told you we met at the Baptist Student Union at Ball State. And then I am 3 months older than her. I like to remind her of that I'm a senior. You know, and I'm also a year older than her in school. And so like I moved up to the next grade level. And so I went to Western Kentucky and I got involved with a Christian fellowship organization there. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys. Like I'm a slow developer. Like see? They have this cue in the back to try to filter me. So that's no. But I'm a slow developer. And so like sometimes, especially as a kid, like I would get myself in a situation I didn't fully realize what was going on. Y'all ever been there? You're like, oh, that's what this is. Okay, so it was like a group outing, but there was this girl. And there was this hot girl. Specifically, she looked like Julia Stiles. Any of y'all remember 90s television shows? No, okay. So take your idea of what a hot girl would be, whatever that is, and okay, that's what this was, okay? And so we've been dating at this point for a year, maybe a year and a half, and it's a Christian thing. It's a good thing, right? It's a Bible study thing. But we go to this group dinner at Denny's. But you ever been on a group thing, but you realize, oh crap, this is a couple thing and you don't quite realize it? And so in the middle of being wooed with turkey links from the Denny's buffet, I'm like, oh crap, she thinks this is a date. I'm gonna get beat from Melissa. But all of a sudden there's this moment of hey man, players gotta play. I've got an option, but there was no option because I was committed. There's moments in your life when you have options, but your commitment is shown by what you choose to stay committed to. That's right. Let's see how the options play out for these girls. No, they said, we want to go with you to your people. But Naomi replied, why should you go on with me? Can I still give birth to other sons who could grow up to be your husbands? No, my daughters, return to your parents' homes, for I am too old to marry again. And even if it were possible, and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry someone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter for me than for you because the Lord himself has raised his fist against me. Okay, now we just got to pause. When you're reading the Bible, there's times where you're like, well, that is weird. That's just straight up crazy. Okay, so either you weren't, if you didn't, that's not your reaction. Either one, you're not listening. Or two, you watch really weird TV shows. Okay, some of you are like, that's just Gossip Girl. There's these weird things that happen. So let me sort of explain to you what's going on. Okay, in Deuteronomy chapter 25 in the Old Testament, the Mosaic Law introduces this thing called a Levirate marriage. A Levirate marriage. And so here's what this is for. In this patriarchal society, in this society where everything goes with the male lineage, what do you do when a woman doesn't have an heir, when a woman hasn't produced a son? And so the problem comes is that man's line, that man's name is removed from the genealogy. It just stops. But here's the deeper problem. Women were property, and the property that they had, all the stuff they had to go somewhere. So a Levirate marriage was where it was mandated that a family member would step up. Specifically, the brother-in-law would step up and they would marry that girl. They would redeem, they would buy that girl, literally buy that girl back into the family. Okay? So this process is called a kinsman redeemer. It's super important for us to follow along the rest of the Ruth story, but here's what I want you to catch today, okay? This is setting us up for there would be a day where people would be broken. There would be a day when people would be without a family. They would be isolated and alone. But there would be a man who would pay a price. There would be a man who would buy us back into the family. They would redeem us back. And that man was a man named Jesus who paid a price for my death and for your death that only he could pay so we could be brought back into the family of God. That you and I we've been redeemed. There's been a price paid for us. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But what we see here is this weird moment where Ruth is saying hey, I've been gone for 10 years. I don't know if there's a redeemer available. I don't know if you're willing to wait. We should question if these girls are willing to wait, they've got some issues. That's just weird. It's just weird. So that's what's happening here, okay? That's setting this up for this redeemer. But Naomi's showing Ruth and Orpah the hopeless situation they're about to walk into. Go back because there's no future and there's no hope. But the story is not over. It says, again, they wept together, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. Look, Naomi said to her, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same. All right, so let's just sort of process. There's two daughters, and there's two different decisions. There's two daughters, and Naomi gives this option to, and it's Orpah is gone. She's not even waited, she is out. But now here's Ruth, and she handles a little bit differently. But no, Orpah, it says she goes back to her family and to her gods. So for 10 years, they've been in this relationship. But when the opt-out moment comes, when there's an opportunity for her to head back to what feels like maybe a future and maybe a hope, and maybe it's a low-risk situation, like she takes it. But what does Ruth do? Like the Bible says, Ruth clings tightly to her. Now, this is one of those moments where we could read something or we could just move on, or like we can maybe stop and we can see maybe theologically there's something deeper that's happening. Maybe there's something below the surface. And so it says she's clung to her. Now, like in our mind, we think of like hugging. We think of like, okay, it's an embrace. It's a Hallmark movie after all, right? There's got to be hugging and crying. But the Hebrew word here is davak. D-A-V-A-Q. Davak. Now, where is that found in the Bible? This is one of these moments where like, hey, this is really interesting. Let's see what this means. And so davak is first introduced. One of the places it's introduced early on in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 2. So Genesis chapter 1, we've got the whole concept that like man, everything is created by God. Genesis chapter 2, man is created. He names all the stuff. He plays like, science doctor, weird stuff going on. But then it says, a woman was made who is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. In verse 24, it says, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. So davak is here. Which word, I wonder, is davak? It's joined. Like for this reason, a man and woman are joined. They're davaked. And so it's telling us that Ruth isn't just hugging in this moment. Ruth is committing. Ruth is all in. Ruth is joined to Naomi. Ruth's not going anywhere. She is committed. And there's this moment where like we have to process like what does our commitment look like? Because like this isn't a sexual word. This isn't a word of intimacy. This isn't a word of like something weird. This is a word of commitment. This is a word of joining. It's a big deal. Like she's davaked. And we have to process this in our life. Like Ruth clings to her even though she has the option, even though she has the chance to get out. Ruth replies, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. So the two of them continued on their journey. Hey, thanks, bro. We'll try this. So the two of them continued on their journey. So let's look at this commitment, okay? Let's look at what's happening in the story of Ruth. Okay, Ruth is making this declaration, and maybe you've heard this before. Maybe you've heard it at a wedding. It's really common in wedding vows. But so like there's this declaration, and she's saying, hey, where you go, I go. Like she's committing to companionship. Where you go, I go. Where you live, I live. Community. Your people will be my people. Like she's committing to family. Your God will be my God. What about a joined faith? And then there's this moment of like, hey, where you die, I'm going to die. Like my everything. Now, like here's the problem, okay? Like some of us in the room, we're committed, but our commitments don't look nothing like that. Like if we're trying to be somewhat healthy, maybe we're like 2 of the 5, maybe 4 of the 5. And then we start to wonder about like all of these things. We worry about like our relationships, why our relationships don't look this way. Like our commitments don't look like these commitments. You're like, hey, I'm not committed like that. You wonder, like, you get into a marriage, you get into a relationship, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, they won't go to church with me. Well, like, their God was football from the very beginning. Why are you shocked now? You've never talked about it. You're worried about, like, why there's no intimacy, why there's none of those things in your life. Well, like, you don't have community. Like, you don't have intimacy, therefore you don't have sex. Like we see these commitments that stand out as like, man, it's such a powerful commitment, but then we look at our commitments and they're so common and they're so shallow. Like we want friendships, but we don't want accountability. Man, we want sex, but we don't want responsibility. We want spouses, but we don't want to serve anybody. We want jobs, but we still want to keep our freedom. Like all of these commitment relationships, we want them, but we want them at the surface level. We don't want to be all in. And we see that Ruth has this moment where she goes all in. Ruth is like committed. She's vested. Like she's showing us what a healthy relationship looks like. But so many of us, we end up settling for unhealthy relationships. We end up settling for something that was never intended for us to be in, but that's what we've settled for. And it's important because the starting point of all healthy relationships is commitment. Commitment is the thing that, like, it's the bedrock, it's the foundation, it's the thing that we can build our relationship on. In this moment, Ruth knows this. Ruth is devouring, Ruth is joining, she's going all in. Ruth is risking everything. Where you die, I will die. They literally could have been going to Judah to die. She's like, I'm all in. Your story will be my story. Like, is that what our relationships look like? Like so many times we still hold the opt-out option. Like, hey, like if it gets rough, like that's not what this is going to look like. If it gets hard, I'm going to opt out. And see, like this is so important because like we have a false perception of commitment. One of the lies we have is what commitment looks like. Commitment is when we're willing to risk everything when the outcomes don't matter. Like I'm all in regardless. So like let's think about like a wedding. Maybe you've been married, maybe you've been to a wedding. Like a lot of times people don't focus on this. Maybe you got too hammered at the party or you were too worried about the wedding night that you don't get to remember what you actually looked somebody in the eye and said to them. For better or worse. In sickness and in health. Till death do us part. I'm in. Like our commitments so often are not commitments based off where the outcome don't matter. It's like, hey, I'm in as long as you're still hot. I'm in until gravity starts affecting your body. I'm in until you get that first year 15 or like that 5-year 50 like in my case. Like we're in, but we want the outcomes to still be like, we want our marriage, we want our relationships to be like that dream that we had. And then all of a sudden you wake up and like that's not reality. Like the reality is you have the situation you've committed yourself to, but how committed are you? Like committing where the outcome don't matter. And like I can tell you this because I've been on both sides of it. I've been in a situation where like I've had relationships that were surface level. Like I knew they were going to be short term. I knew I wasn't going all in with them. I've had relationships that like, man, I would die on a hill for these people. I've had jobs that are like my life desire. Like I love this place. Like I want to die with Pastor Brandon. I want to die serving you guys. I've had jobs where it was like I was looking for a job when I found this one. I've been on both sides of this commitment in my marriage. My wife and I, we've been married for 16 years. You know, people joke around about the honeymoon phase. They joke around about like that 7-year itch. Year 5 was our year. Let me tell you why year 5 was so significant. Because year 5 was the first year I got naked in front of my wife and wasn't ashamed. It was the first year that I was intimate. It was the first year I was fully known. So we had this idea, like I'd been in ministry for a while and I had this opportunity and I felt like I was supposed to go plant a church. And so they had this vetting process where like they would bring you to like this training to where they'd find out like, hey, can you plant a church? Should you not? They let me do it. They probably shouldn't have. Some of you are like, no, they shouldn't have. But so there was this moment where you had to go to a counselor and you had to basically, they wanted to know like, hey, is there any issues? Is there any past stuff that you haven't talked about? And so psychologically, there's this thing called selective amnesia. It's where like your brain, it's for victims of trauma, your brain disconnects in those places where you intentionally don't remember the pain of the past. And so for whatever reason at year 5, whatever reason in front of this dude I've never seen before, never seen since, he says, is there anything y'all need to talk about? My wife's like, no, we're good. I'm like, well, technically, actually. And I drop on my wife 5 years into our marriage like I was a victim of childhood trauma that's affected every day of my life and affected every night of my marriage. And for 5 years, she never knew that. Like it was an opt-out moment. It was, have you been truthful with me about any of this moment? It was a moment where like this wasn't the for better that she signed on for. It wasn't the risk she desired to take. But she devoked me. She clung to me. At the year 8 mark, where like I was still struggling with some of the issues that came out of that revelation, like she still clung to me. Man, it's because commitment is risking where the outcome doesn't matter. Commitment is going all in. Commitment is like, even when I have the chance to get out, I'm diving deeper into this thing. It's where you go, I go. It was a little while ago, my wife had pleurisy. Like it was a issue with her lungs. It was showing up in her back. And it was this deal where like she couldn't lay down. Like the only way she could be comfortable was on the couch. Now we have a memory foam mattress. It's not one of those high-end ones. It's one you get on Amazon and it blows out like a stuffed peanut. But man, it is better than the couch. But she had to sleep on the couch. The kids woke up and they come downstairs and both of us are on the couch. And like, what are you doing? Where she goes, I go. I remember having to have stomach surgery. Like I had some pretty intense GI issues. And like I've had 2 of them. The first thing I saw when I woke up was her. First thing I wanted was Chick-fil-A. But where I go, she goes. See, there's this moment where we have to process what our commitments look like. Like, what kind of person are you going to be? Are you going to be a person who is committed? Or are you going to be a person that chooses not to be committed? Because this is so important. Okay, I want to go back a little bit. We start off in Ruth chapter 1 in this era of depression and this story that's like so depressing, but there's something happening that actually makes it not as depressing as what it sounds like. So in Ruth chapter 1, verse 1, it says, in the days when the judges ruled Israel. Now this is so easy for us to miss, but like, okay, so it's happening in Judges. What's so significant about Judges? Well, if you like flip your Bible back 1 page, this is the very last thing it says. In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Like they grew up in a society, they lived in a society where like the only thing you really had to worry about was you. Man, like it so sounds like America right now. It sounds like the lies that you've grown up with. It sounds like the dreams and the influence you've had that like you need to be happy. You need to provide for yourself. You need to do whatever feels good to you. That one night thing, like, man, if it feels good, do it. And like the reason we're reading about Ruth all these years later, the reason that she's heralded as like an influence for truth in relationships is because, man, in a world where it was so common to look after yourself, what Ruth does is so uncommon. And like you have this moment where you have to decide, do you want to be like a regular person right now, or do you want to be something extraordinary? Do you want to have a relationship that's just, or do you want to be a relationship that your family tree will talk about? That you are going to change your family tree because you became a family pillar. What do your commitments look like? Have you devoured yourself with someone? Are you all in? Are you clinging tightly with someone? Maybe you're in a relationship right now, and maybe you're at that option moment. Maybe you're at that option in or option out moment where you need to say, like, am I willing to devote to that? Like some of you, the answer needs to be no. Your next step may be like an awkward conversation on the way home that's like, hey, this isn't working for me. Maybe it needs to be a conversation of like, hey, your God's not my God. Where you go, I'm not going. You may need to have that hard conversation because maybe you've settled for uncommon. Maybe you've settled for false security when God has so much more for you. Maybe you're a person where you are in a relationship and you're at that tipping point moment where you're like, hey, you've had opt-out moments. The girl wasn't the girl of your dreams. There was nightmares that you didn't know was in that closet. Maybe there was baggage that man brought into the relationship and you found that there's moments where like, hey, you can get out. Maybe you're in an opt-out moment right now. And you need to decide, what are you going to cling to? See, some of us, it's our relationships. Some of us, it's our friendships. The Bible says bad company corrupts good character. Some of you have devoted yourself to the wrong people and you're dying because of the wrong influences in your life. Some of us, it's a job. Some of us, you're at that tipping point where you need to decide, is this what I'm willing to give my life to? But man, some of you, that conversation's about Jesus. The Bible says that author and perfecter, that redeemer who buys us back. Like, see, all of these relationships, they're commitments that you just simply have to choose. Am I going to devote to that? Am I going to commit to that? Man, this is so important because, like, Jesus had this moment. Jesus had this moment where he had an opt-in, opt-out moment. Like, when it comes to you, like, he had the moment. Is he going to be committed to you or is he not? It was a Thursday. It was a Thursday, and Jesus has done this moment with his disciples, and they go to a garden to pray, and he goes a little further with his boys. And in this moment, he's all by himself, and he's praying to God. And he says, hey, if there's any way this cup of suffering can pass from me, if there's any way I can opt out, if there's any way that I don't have to do that, like, let it be. Like, he's at that opt-out moment. Boys, just say, not my will, not the will of what pleases me, not the thing that's best for Jesus, because, like, getting hung up on a tree wasn't the best option for him, but not what pleases him, but he said, not my will, Father, but your will be done. Hours later, he goes from that garden to a trial, from a trial to a jail, from a jail to a beating, from a beating to a cross. He pays a price that no man should have paid for me and for you. They hang him up on a cross on a Friday. He pays this price. He redeems us. He buys me. He buys you back into relationship. He buys us back into the family of God. 3 days later, he comes up out of that grave. And it goes from a hopeless situation to, man, we can do anything because that same God that got out of a grave is in me and he's in you because he's redeemed us. Now, here's the thing. He's devoked us. He's clung to us, but he's given you the option of what are you clinging to? You have a simple choice. Like, when we talk about commitment, when we talk about healthy relationships with commitments, you have the choice. What are you committing to? What are you devoting to? Be all in. Jesus, we praise you in this place. God, that you are a God of commitment. You are a God, you tell us to let our yes be yes and let our no be no. Let us be people who are confident, people who are committed to things. God, I pray right now you can show us the relationships that we have. God, some of us were in relationships that weren't set up on truth. They were set up on lies. They become so unhealthy. God, I pray you'll give us the boldness and the confidence to get out of those unhealthy relationships. God, I pray we won't here to be committed in something that's dysfunctional. We won't here to be committed into something that is pulling us down, committed to something that's unbiblical. God, I pray some people have the boldness to get up and get out. But God, I pray for some of us, we're striving to have healthy relationships. God, I pray for some of us what we'll do in this moment is we say we're going to be all in. Yes, we may have had those moments where we could have got out, Jesus, but God, we can follow the example you set for us. You show us what it means to risk everything when the outcome doesn't matter. God, in this moment, you were showing us how much you risked for us. God, that you hung on a tree for me. God, you had the nails placed in your hands and feet. You took a beating that I should have got out of my wickedness, out of my brokenness. But God, while we were yet sinners, you died for us. Like the love you have, the redeeming love you have for us. God, in this moment, I pray we can be presented with this truth that while we were sinners, you died for us. But yet you didn't call us to stay there. That you call us into a life of hope. You call us into a life of victory. You call us into a life of relationship. God, all we have to do is choose. All we have to do is commit and believe and follow after you. So Jesus, in this moment right now, God, while nobody's looking around, I pray that people will choose to be committed to you. I pray people will choose to devote you. Maybe you're in this room, and maybe in this moment you just need this moment to say, that's me. Like, I am choosing Jesus. I just want to encourage you to be bold in this moment. Like, if that's you, if you'll just raise your hand where you are, if you're online, if you'll just share that in the comments, and if you'll just keep your hand up, like this moment you're saying, I'm coming all in with you, Jesus. God, I'm risking my life. I'm risking my eternity with you, Jesus. Like, I'm committed. Maybe you're in this room and you think you're in a committed relationship, but it don't look like this. It don't look like Ruth's commitment. It's not all in. Like, you've still left options on the table. God, I pray right now that you will give us the boldness to say, I am in. That I'm devouring my spouse. I'm going to cling to my significant other. Like, I am going to be that standard bearer. I'm going to be the best husband, the best wife. I'm going to be the best friend. I'm going to be the best employee because you call us to a high standard. God, I pray that we can understand the cost of committing to you. And then, God, I pray you give us the boldness, the strength, God, the selflessness to commit to you, that we will be uncommon. God, we will be extraordinary. God, we will be everything we can be for you, Jesus. We pray this in your name, and your church says, amen.
Amen.
I mean, what a message.
Yeah.
Pastor Dustin did incredible.
Yes.
And, like, I love his humor anyways, because it's, like, funny when you don't think it's going to be funny. So it makes you laugh even further. And sometimes he doesn't even, like, mean for it to be funny.
Yeah.
But it's funny. But his messages are always so timely.
Yeah,
and today,
sure.
like, him talking through commitment and the relationships and where you're going with that, like,
Yeah.
it was one of those, like, heart-pricking things, like, ooh, that's probably me. I should probably do that. But the thing that caught me was when he said, commitment is risk where the outcome doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Like, I've never thought about that,
No,
because,
and-
like, they say
yeah.
calculated risks all the time. Like,
Right.
you take calculated risks. Like, I know what I'm going to lose, what I'm going to gain, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. Those are kind of risks I like. But when I'm, like, calculating that, and it doesn't even matter because I'm committed no matter what. Like, Kelsey's my friend. She's one of my BFFs. As her daughter would say, it's my best friend. Like, she
My
says
best
it with, like, the biggest, like, draw on the, and I can't even do it right. But she's one of my besties, for sure. And our commitment towards our relationship is one of those things where it's like, it doesn't really matter. Like, there's no risk involved. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what happens because, like, I'm committed to being her friend. I'm committed to being a follower of Jesus. Doesn't matter what happens to the road. Doesn't matter what happens down the path that I'm walking on and how far things get or how hard things get. Like, I'm committed. Doesn't matter what the risk is.
Right.
My marriage, like, I'm in it for the long haul. When I said I do, it's till the day I die, which, by the way, we're 2 years apart, so it's going to be at 102 and 100, just so y'all know. I'm going to be that feisty old lady at the nursing home, and they always make fun because I love hard candy, so I'll definitely have the hard candy. But I'm committed to that marriage. Like, I'm committed no matter what. There's no risk too big, too small. Like, doesn't matter. I'm committed. So that point just really resonated with my soul.
Yeah, for sure. Today was just, it was all, that talk all about commitment and talking about how, you know, we really need to stay focused and committed to the things that we cherish.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I cherish, you
Yeah.
know, my husband and I, we cherish each other, we cherish our family, we cherish our friends, but we also cherish our church.
Yeah.
Generations Church is something that we invest in, both with our time, with our talents, and our treasure, you know, with our money. We tithe regularly. I think we go above and beyond our tithe. We, you know, we live open-handed. We
Yeah.
talk about that a lot and just how to live open-handedly. I want to challenge you today. If that's something that you aren't currently doing or you feel led to do, take that next step.
Yeah.
Like, that might be your next step in something, and just saying, you know what, this is something that I want to be committed to. This is something that I value. This is something that I cherish. This is a risk where the outcome doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, take that and cherish it and be committed to it and see where that takes you, see where that leads you.
Yeah, EJ said last week, and it was kind of like one of those, everyone always laughs around here because it's like EJ says things and they're usually funny, but you're like fifth time he says something, you're like, ah.
Yeah.
And he said, it doesn't matter what you give, it's the posture of your heart.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, like, just like she's saying with the commitment, like, hey, you know what? It may be $5. It may be $1. It may be, you know, just 50 cents, whatever it is, as far as your giving goes, of your treasure. Like, it just doesn't matter because it's a posture of your heart.
Right.
So
God doesn't care about how much you give, just that you're willing.
Yep.
You know, that you're living open-handed and being willing to give and and then to receive what He gives you.
Yeah.
You know,
and open-handed. You already got it open. Like, here it is. We're ready. Where's it at? Kind of thing, you know. Anyways, well, to recap back through, that was an awesome message today. We hope you had an awesome experience with us today. Make sure you are thinking about, going through about all the abouts about a next step.
Right.
There's a you haven't met yet, and there's always a next step for you. Small groups happening this week. Don't forget, it's usually free food. So if that doesn't get you there, I don't know what will. And then Right Now Media, also free. It's Right Now Media. It comes in your email. There was a sign up link. If not, hit us up. We'll let you know how to get on there, but it's free for you too. Yeah. Church, we love y'all. We're excited for you this week, and we hope that God really just burst your bubble this week with all His blessings.
Have a great week, guys.
See ya.
Thank you.